Well, I can never keep this right brain, left brain thing straight, but I know that when it comes to music and that wonderful gift that we just have, we're thinking with one side of our brain, and now, we're kind of like a car where we're trying to, those of you that remember stick shift, trying to get it into the other gear because now it's time for a few words and a different gear for a second and the other part of the brain. But in a way, I'm kind of hoping you're going to leave things in neutral and just coast for a minute so that we keep some of that joy that comes from the way music unlocks a different part of our brain. This is a true story, and if it seems like I'm disparaging a real saint, it's only because he was speaking for all of us. But in this district, Elkhart County, Dan West, the founder of Heifer International, is claimed by several churches here in each way, and they actually have a claim. Evidently, this farmer, Dan West, who had the genius of an idea for Heifer International, attended several churches. He was a farmer up in the Middlebury area, and as a relief worker, as many of you know, he went to Spain during the Spanish Civil War, and he faced life or death choices. There was this powdered milk that would be reconstituted with water, and relief workers had to make choices. Would they give some of this life-giving milk to babies that would likely not survive, or give it to them so they had a chance and then endanger those that were a little healthier and might benefit and thrive through having this powdered milk? And according to the story, and we have no reason to doubt it, Dan West thought to himself, what these people need is not a cup, but a cow. And of course, over the years, he encouraged Indiana farmers to donate heifers, and specifically impregnated heifers that ultimately were taken overseas following World War II to farmers on both sides of the conflict. And they would have the gift not only of an animal that produced milk, a healthy animal that had not faced the ravages of war, that had not been eaten or slain or had bombs dropped on it, and that when the calf came, they were to spread that gift of life. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer, and today, as you know, Heifer International is not just a brethren thing. The gifts are shared by many denominations who work together cooperatively, and it's animals of all types around the globe. Now we can look back and say, great idea. But the truth is, when Dan got up in his church to describe this program, a venerable saint, and I use that word deliberately because I knew him, and he was a saint. But this happened before I was born even. He rose and said with anger, "You can't do that. It's communism." Nevertheless, the congregation went forward to share that. But that fear that somehow if we shared everything, it would be subversive, goes back to the early Christian days. What was the Roman Empire to think? In a society where rich people ate with rich people, and poor people ate with poor people, and slaves ate with slaves, and free ate with free, and men ate with men, and women ate with women, and educated people ate with other educated people, and elites of all kind only ate with folks who were like themselves. And certainly we don't experience that today because nobody listens to just one news channel so that they only hear what they want to hear. In the first Christian century under Rome, they had to think this was subversive when slave and free, male and female, Greek-speaking, Aramaic-speaking people sat down together to eat and share. Indeed, Governor Pliny of Bithynia sent back a report to the Emperor Trajan to say that he had tortured several slaves who were female deacons of the church to find out what was going on. And as far as he could tell, they met before dawn to break bread and share a meal and sing a hymn to Christ as to a God. Subversive. Which brings us to this passage. And right away, it makes me a little nervous. It says here that they had all things in common. You know, if we were to suggest we do that today, I think I'm going to come out ahead if we dump everything out in the middle and then split it up equally. And indeed, like that venerable saint who said, you can't do that, it's communism, there is fear when we read the scripture and realize, are we really ready to share all things in common? The first brethren tried it and they failed. They couldn't do it. Even though they depended on each other for survival in a Europe where they were persecuted, they couldn't do it. And few groups have succeeded, though many have tried. I think the closest ones that succeed are the Hutterites, where they all eat at a common table. All of their paychecks go into a pot, and the only thing they have is maybe a drawer, which they're allowed to lock, but that's about it. Otherwise, it all belongs to everybody in the community. So when I read this scripture, automatically we go, all right, we've already failed. Here we had this wonderful singing, and then I have to tell you, we're not doing it. And not only that, we're not going to do it. Everybody here is ready to share out of their own wallet, out of their own purse for somebody they know has a need. I'm aware that many of you do it constantly. I'm aware that if we have a guest come and we pass the hat, we're ready to share. I'm aware that we're ready to support the many important ministries, but we're not ready to dump everything into the middle and say, now it belongs to all of us. So are we failures? Well, once again, it's a problem that we're only reading part of a verse. I'm not sure I'm ready to do it, and I'm not sure you're ready to do it, and I'm not sure it would work very well if we tried it. The Acts church had a real problem shortly thereafter because the people began to say, hey, how come our widows aren't getting as much food out of the common pot as your widows are? And they began to complain because our people don't get the same things you do. So I don't know, it's human nature. But let's look at the rest of that scripture. They met with gladness and simplicity, and they experienced great joy with the breaking of the bread. The governor Pliny the Younger, when he found out this subversive group was meeting before dawn with slaves who were leaders, religious leaders of the group, boy, you can hear the crime that they had. They met before dawn and broke bread together and sang a hymn to Christ as to a God. We could share all of our cash and have one common checkbook, and if we did not have love, we would be like a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. We're missing the point. The real point is they met with gladness, simplicity, and took great joy in breaking bread together. Because for Christians, heaven doesn't start when we die, although it certainly gets a whole lot better. It's going on now. When we hear our brothers sing, we get a joyful taste of heaven because it's unleashing a part of our brain that gets chained down by logic and by our day-to-day living. When we meet each other in the grocery store and one of us says, so what are you doing for lunch? You are doing something more like the early church than anything else you're going to do this week, because that's going to unlock joy and it will lead to even more ministry that satisfies Jesus Christ. When we're just glad to be together, and when our guests in our midst can feel our gladness, that's powerful. I was a pastor here in Elkhart County in the 90s. And one time I was taking a church member to the Elkhart Clinic because she couldn't drive herself. And so we're sitting there. And you have everybody there. And I guess we didn't have HIPAA rules in those days because 2 people in the room decided to air their dirty laundry. You will not believe it, but these 2 people had the worst pastor in the history of Christendom. In the last 2,000 years, there's never been a pastor this bad because all they could do the entire time they were there was agree with each other about how terrible their pastor was, how terrible their church was, how terrible the people were. They went through the whole laundry list in public. They didn't even have the decency to do what most people do, which is meet in the church parking lot near their car. And at least show they were ashamed of what they were doing. Well, I finally got up and said, thank you for telling us what a wonderful church you go to and how you don't belong. If you spend half the energy you spend on denigrating your pastor and your church, think of what a church it would be. As I remember, they looked like 2 fish that had been pulled out of the water. Thank you for sharing joy with me every week. I want to hear more songs, but I'm going to say we're going to take 2 minutes now. Get up and tell somebody what you like about them and what you like about your church. And our guests, please let somebody here know what you love about your church, what makes you happy. Let's get up and do it. This is the sound that I like to hear when we go and have coffee and cookies between worship and Sunday school. This is the sound that was so wonderful when a few weeks ago before church council, Francisco brought a whole bunch of Olive Garden there and everybody was just laughing and talking. This is the sound we hear during Vacation Bible School Week when people are sharing and blessing each other. And I just pray that, we live in the real world, we do what we got to do, but never miss an opportunity to break bread with your sisters and brothers here and around the world. Never miss an opportunity to find the good and to praise it. And everything else will fall into its place. Let's live in heaven now. Amen.